Hello, everyone. This is Mark Moore. We're going to get started in just a minute or so. Thank you. Hello again, everyone. My name is Mark Moore. I'm a board member of the National Hydrologic Warning Council. I'm going to be hosting our July webinar series, which is going to be presented by Henry from CoCoRaHS. Before I get started, I just wanted to make a few announcements and provide some additional information. So first off, if you enjoy these webinars, if you've been watching them in the past, if you have topic ideas for the future, let us know. The biggest thing is we're always looking for what you guys want to hear. So if there's a specific topic we haven't covered yet, feel free to shoot us an email and we will try to get that included in our upcoming webinar series. Additionally, all of our past webinars have been recorded and placed on our YouTube channel, including this one, which will be placed on the YouTube channel within a day or two of the presentation. Those links are available in follow-up emails. You can find it by searching NHWC YouTube, or if you can't find it through any of those methods, feel free to reach out and talk to me directly. We are also going to be posting some of those links on the NHWC forum. So if you don't want to choose any of those three options, I've got one more for you, which is to check out the NHWC forum, where we're going to start posting some brief webinar descriptions and links to them on the YouTube page. Last, I want to mention that if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. You can ask them as the presentation is going on, and I will be asking Henry those questions once he finishes his presentation at the end. But you can still go ahead and shoot those over sooner, just so you don't forget, and we'll cover those once time is just about up. So without further ado, I will go ahead and pass it over to Henry. Henry is the U.S. coordinator for CoCoRaHS and a meteorologist for the organization. And he's going to talk a little bit about, CoCoRaHS, who they are, what they do, and some really cool stuff. So without further ado, here's Henry. And Henry, you are still muted right now.
There we go. Okay, I should be unmuted.
Correct.
And can you see my screen?
We can, yes.
Great. Let me minimize the little one at the top there. And well, thank you for inviting us to present. We've had a relationship with you guys for a long time, and we really appreciate the airtime to tell you a little bit about CoCoRaHS. And many of you may know who we are, but I'm going to go from scratch here, thinking that many people have not heard of the organization. We'll take a look at a bit of our history, what we do, what we measure, and then how you can join as well. So CoCoRaHS, the title is the Volunteer Precipitation Observations, Citizen Science Providing Valuable Local Information During Extreme Rainfall Events, and you're all familiar with those, as well as prolonged drought conditions. And let's see on that. Oh, there we go. So let me give you a little short history of CoCoRaHS. And the timing is excellent for this webinar because CoCoRaHS tomorrow actually will be the 25th anniversary of the Fort Collins flood, which was the impetus for CoCoRaHS. It unfortunately took 5 lives. It was an event that was unexpected here. If you look at some of the pictures on this slide, one of the interesting ones is the bottom right, and that is the CSU, Colorado State University Library. And they had just started renovations on the library and moved all of the books to the basement. And you can guess what happened to those books during the flood. That was pretty unfortunate. So the flood occurred, and it was a kind of a warm core system, a lot of rain over a short amount of time, and just affecting a small area of the city. And so if you look at the picture here on my left, point A, it was the area where most of the rain fell, 14.5 inches. That's almost our whole year's worth of precipitation in 24 hours. And then point B, which is about 2 or 3 miles from I-25. If you've ever been to Fort Collins, you know the west side of town is up against the foothills. It kind of slopes towards the right, and that area only received 2 inches of rain. So it was quite an event. Many people on the east side of town didn't even realize what was going on at the time, and there were not a lot of rain gauges out there. So the flooding occurred. There were other storms going on, more severe around northern Colorado at that time, and so a warning never got put out for this particular storm. So we learned some stuff from it, and I was not here at the time, but Nolan Duskin, our founder, can tell you more about this. But we learned 2 things. One, as many of you know, there are the extreme local variations possible from these convective storms, where it can be raining cats and dogs at one side of the street, and a mile away the sun is out. And then number 2 was that the important role individuals can play in measuring, mapping, and reporting precipitation. So what happened, we're going the wrong way here. Here we go. In 1998, a little bit, just about a year later, we started CoCoRaHS here. There's the old logo at the beginning. Just up and down the Front Range, we had a few dozen volunteers as we started things out, and the network began to grow. Today, we have over 25,000 volunteers, and let me show you a map on that here in the United States. We're also in all of the states. We're in all the provinces of Canada. We're in Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, the Bahamas, and we'll be starting September 1st in Guam. So we've expanded a lot, and we have a lot of data points out there, and so that's really interesting to see. Here's our website. If you have a pen to write down the website, if you haven't been there before, it's right there at the bottom. And I'll leave that up just for a second. I'm sure Mark can have that posted too on the notes afterwards. So we just measure precipitation. We decided to just stick with one thing, and we became the largest source of daily precipitation measurements in the United States. We also measure snowfall in the winter, and volunteers measure both the snowfall depth, the new and accumulated, as well as the water content known as the SWE. So it's good to know how much precipitation, how much liquid is in that snow that fell. And then another thing we've done over time is measure hail. We've become one of the largest repositories of hail data in the United States. And so we would deploy hail pads out there. Folks would measure what fell and report that. They can also report that in real time now, and that gives the Weather Service a heads up on when the storms are pretty severe. We use a 4-inch diameter high capacity plastic rain gauge. That's a picture of it on the right. Very accurate gauge. With that gauge, compared to tipping buckets, which tend to over measure sometimes, This gauge holds down to the 100th of an inch, and also 11.5 inches of precipitation before it does overflow. The gauge costs approximately $35, and they're available through several different sources. We've got a few of those listed on our website. Great gauge used now by the National Weather Service in the co-op program. They had used for years and years the 8-inch diameter gauge, and we have run studies now for pretty close to 20 years comparing the two, and the correlation is almost exact between the two gauges. So it's a great gauge, and if you don't have one like this in your yard, if you're using a different one, I would suggest you try this. Also, if you have an automated gauge, try one of these CoCoRaHS gauges out and take a look, and you see the difference sometimes what you'll get with their measurements. Our observers report 24-hour precipitation. So each morning at around 7 a.m., we ask them to go out and take a reading. We have an app to make it convenient for folks. We also have an online form. And on the online form, both places, but it's kind of easy on the online form to add observation notes, especially when you have heavy rain. Those notes are really helpful in there. Here's one talking about heavy thunderstorms overnight, intense lightning and gusty winds, many tree branches fallen in the backyard. This is also helpful in snowfall, but if we get the notes in there, we know that observation is pretty accurate, and we do have a vigorous or rigorous, I should say, QC process where we take a look at the data and make sure most of it online is as accurate as possible. The volunteers' observations then, as soon as they put them in, are immediately available for the public to view and use. This is a map form. We also have a table form which you can sort. This is you can see all the little dots on there. This is a new mapping system that went into effect last year, and you can really zoom in and set different parameters. I'll talk to you in a minute about that. In fact, here we are. So we can zoom in. This is looking at the Four Corners region, and on the right, there's a whole host of parameters you can set. You can set for counties, the maps. You can look at accumulated amounts up to 45 days. You can customize that. So it's a really great system to take a look at what has fallen where, and a lot of folks use that. And then you can really drill down. So here's a look at Las Cruces, New Mexico. A little while back, this accumulated report, but you can see on the city view what has fallen where. And that's really, really helpful, especially in those convective events where the variation. Give it a try later on today. If you go back and take a look at, especially the St. Louis storm that we all know about, the flooding that happened yesterday. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but you try to take a look there, and you can play around with the mapping system, and it's pretty cool. And you don't have to be an observer to use our stuff. So all this data is free and open to the public, and so feel free to take a look and see what your neighbors and relatives may have in their area across the country. One neat thing is the volunteers' data here is permanently archived and available in a variety of summary reports. NCEI's Global Historic Climate Network, the daily reports there go into that, and once you have 100 observations, they become part of that record, and so that's pretty neat. And then we list a water year summary. Many of you are familiar with the water year, October 1st through September 30th. All kinds of things you can look at on that. I'll just show a quick example here. And this is a nice thing. So as an observer, you can go back and take a look over the water year, what your records were there. What was your monthly precipitation compared to the PRISM 30-day average by PRISM, shown on that one there. We also have accumulated precipitation, so you can watch through the months how that accumulates. And then what I like is a daily precip, so you can really point out when those events occurred that were really significant. You can take a look at that. So these are all out there, again, for the public to view, and you can go and take a look at other people's stations and so forth on that page. Our goal is to provide high quality precipitation measurements, and then also giving back to the public. We want to do educational stuff. We have resources and outreach to the public as well. And so that's a kind of our gift back to those who do the observations. So we're all over the place, and just to show you some of the density in metro regions, and that's where I know you guys work with the alert gauges and so forth. Here's just 4 quick examples around the country: Minneapolis, Seattle, Austin, DC, and you know, the observations there are just as helpful as in other places. And another, you wouldn't think rural areas would have a lot, but we've got a couple places in the country that are very rural, under 2,000, under 2,500 folks in Hamilton County, Kansas, 16 observers there. And then in Liberty County, Montana, we've got about 22 observers in that area up there. So these are really helpful for just getting data where there's really sparse population. And so again, a variety of different maps and stuff you can look at online. And here's our educational opportunities. Again, we want to help provide the public with a better understanding of weather and climate. We've got all kinds of stuff. I'll talk about those kind of at the end. So let's look at rainfall real quick. And one of our things that we've never wanted to just be the sole source of information. We want to supplement existing networks out there. And so, you know, the co-op network, the different alert systems that are around there, we want to be there to help fill in those gaps, because a lot of times the observations are few and far between in several places. And so our goal is to supplement existing networks and work in collaboration with those. And that, again, we are the community collaborative there, rain, hail, and snow network. So collaboration is in our name. We say when it rains, we pour. And so we'll show you a little bit about here on documenting heavy rainfall events with some examples I have. Again, rainfall extremely variable. A dense network, we hope to capture those observations from an obscure storm. Interesting pictures here. The one on the right, I was flying into Atlanta, Georgia. I love getting a window seat. If any of you are meteorologists out there or love clouds, we love that window. Nothing worse than getting the middle seat and the guy pulls the shade down next to you. But I took this picture, and it really showed just how variable the rainfall can be. And that's just, those are some arbitrary numbers I made up there, but you can see that rain shaft coming down, hitting a small part of town. And then the bottom left one is out here at Colorado State, rains moving through. So again, that variability from the rain, the convective storms. So here's a great example for those of you in Texas, near New Braunfels, just south of Austin, Comal County. And this one occurred, is going back a little bit, but it's 7.12 inches. If you look around there on the map, you'll see that barely anybody else nearby got basically 1/10 of an inch. And all of this rain fell within 2 hours. It was a pulse thunderstorm that just popped up right over this farmer's area. In fact, his whole area got flooded out. His wife was home at the time and gave the report, and he couldn't even get back into his property. But again, it shows you how that one example or that one observation can make a difference. So people say, well, you know, you got somebody nearby. Do you really need me? Yeah, in many cases, sometimes you can make the difference. And so that's an example there. And then almost the same area, we take a look 2 years later in June of 10, and boy, they got shellacked there with another heavy event. Gauge is overflowed. You can see the 11.30, that's the maximum in the gauge. And so people didn't get a chance to get out and empty the gauge overnight. But there's some examples there, and near New Braunfels, 7 inches north of there, 2 or 5 inches northeast. Again, those thunderstorms moved through and just sat there. So it's great to have that dense network where we can pick up on this, and really gives an idea of you know, what has fallen, and helps for flooding looking at flooding in the area. A couple more examples. Chicago in 2011. This was another significant event here. Some thunderstorms just sat and moved through. Again, in the city, picking up 3 inches, but is scattered throughout that whole area there in Cook County. Even some places with 7 inches as you got north of the north in the county. Hurricane Harvey, which many of you are probably familiar with, in 2017. This is a 1-day total, so we're looking at wow, 21 inches in some places. You remember how devastating that was. That was the Galveston area and Houston. And so the flood district there does rely a lot on our reports. Are great supporters of CoCoRaHS, and hopefully those observations were helpful in looking at many of the gauges that they had to check and compare with. Just recently this year in June, south of Miami, just near Key Biscayne and that area, right along the coast, 24 hours there. Wow, we're looking at 10 inches of rain, 11 inches of rain, and this is not unusual to see along the Florida coast, and so we see this also along the Gulf Coast as well. So heavy rainfall, and then yesterday's storm. Here's a look at the St. Louis metro area. Just that little tiny map on the top just shows kind of, you probably can't even read it, but those are the dots, kind of northwest of St. Louis up near St. Peter's area there, and the Wentzville area getting 12 inches of rain. Again, being able to drill down and take a look at this, great information, and we appreciate the observers out there. But again, looking at another metro area, CoCoRaHS picking up those observations, and a lot of those all go to the Weather Service, and that they're able to do some post-storm analysis and so forth after that. Another example, in Fort Collins back in 2009, I remember this day well. We were headed out of town to go to a Rockies game in Denver, and I had a garden in town, and hail came with this storm as well. You can see this storm moving from the northwest across the city. It dumped a lot of rainfall, and what was great with that, we have pretty good dense network here in Fort Collins. That's the diameter there is about 10 miles across, so you can see the real variations in the rainfall from that one storm. We're just north of Colorado State University, up to 2.5 to 3 inches of rain, and just southwest of town, boy, they just missed it, only 1/10. So again, having a dense network within your area of volunteer observers can really give you some really great data. We kind of say it's like increasing the number of pixels on your digital camera with CoCoRaHS. So the more observations, the better detail of what fell and what didn't. And take a look at the top, that's without the CoCoRaHS data. And then this is from the Midwest Regional Climate Center, and then with the CoCoRaHS data, so you can see much more finer detail of the precipitation. Well, people say, who uses the observations? And this is a really important thing that we drill home to the observer, that yes, your stuff does get used on a regular basis by many different folks. Here's a quick list on the right: weather forecasters, researchers, agriculture, engineering, recreation, many, many different uses. And I'm going to go into it, just a couple quick ones here who use it regularly. The National Operational Hydrologic Remote Sensing Center. It's a mouthful. NORISC, they're known as. You're probably familiar with them, out of Chanhassen, Minnesota. They look at a lot of the snowfall information. NOAA's River Forecast Centers, the National Hurricane Center, big fans of CoCoRaHS. And then locally here, Denver's Mile High Flood Control District. So here's a look at NORISC. Again, they get over 50% of their snow observation reports come from CoCoRaHS volunteers, and gives us a kind of a heads up on snow melt. They look at the SWE of the snowpack. There's a gentleman on the top left. There's a dedicated observer taking his core. He was in the mountains of Colorado. But again, all this information goes to those guys, and they're able to use that in their forecasts, and it's very helpful. NOAA's River Forecast Center is big fans of CoCoRaHS. You can see the different forecast centers there on the left. And again, they'll use that information for ground truth of what's happening, what fell, and then it helps them to forecast the river levels and so forth downstream. National Hurricane Center, these are two older examples. We have other ones, but these were pretty good ones that were done. Looking at Tropical Storm Faye and Hurricane Irene. And Dan Brown, good friend of ours at the Hurricane Center, again, big fans of CoCoRaHS. In fact, Ken Graham, who is now the director of the National Weather Service, was with the Hurricane Center, and he helped promote us a lot in different places. So it's very helpful for that post-storm analysis. Also getting the word out. I've been on Hurricane Awareness Tour with those guys, how important it is to look at rainfall, because probably the #1 killer in most tropical systems is the flooding and the rainfall that falls. And then last but not least, Denver's Mile High Flood Districts, their alert system, the data here on the map combined with CoCoRaHS data. And so what's great about this is our observations help them to be able to check their gauges. Sometimes a gauge may be malfunctioning or whatever. They're able to look at nearby amounts, and then we also try to fill in the gaps where they are not. But I know there's several alert systems around the country, and hopefully CoCoRaHS is doing the same and can really help you guys out with that. And so that the more density of observers we have in these metro areas, the more advantageous it is to the alert systems. We also alarm for heavy rainfall events. So when something's coming and it looks like it's really raining out there, we ask our observers to go online and submit what's called a significant weather report. These go right to the National Weather Service's AWIP stations, sends an alarm right out, and basically they can use that criteria to determine whether to issue a flash flood warning, also for snowfall, heavy snowfall as well, and then for hail. Here's an example of a significant weather report as some thunderstorms moved east over the Providence, Rhode Island area. A CoCoRaHS observer put in that they had 1 inch of rain in 15 minutes. And Joe from the Weather Service there in Taunton, you can see what he wrote there. It was basically led to issuance of a timely flash flood warning. It was the start of the evening rush hour. Several cars were stranded. So again, these are extra eyes and ears out there, and each CoCoRaHS observer can do this. It's quicker than picking up a telephone and calling the Weather Service, because it goes right in, and they know the Weather Service. Wow, these are CoCoRaHS observers, so they're trained, they know what they're talking about, and so they trust our observations that come in. We educate the public on extreme precipitation. That's another thing we like to do. So we want to make them flood aware, turn around, don't drown, all those type of things like that, with the National Weather Service partnering on that. Our message of the day goes out. This one is today's message of the day, just looking at the potential for flash flooding again this week as we celebrate, or not celebrate, but remember the 1997 Fort Collins flood 25 years ago. And so again, different messages go out talking about that. And we have animations on heavy precipitation and so forth. So again, making the public aware of what can happen when we do have the potential for heavy rainfall. We have something called Weather Talk webinars, very similar to what you guys are doing here. In fact, Mark is going to join us in November and do one on your organization for us to show our CoCoRaHS observers. So we really appreciate that. We archive all of these. It's almost exactly like what you guys do. We take questions and answers, but we've got a variety of topics. Here's two I just picked out, given a while back: flash floods by Matt Kelsch from Comet there in Boulder, and then Bill Capel with Applied Weather Associates. They take a look at basically at the heavy events, and so he did one on extreme rainfall. All of these are archived. You can go in and take a look at them. And not only this, but we got one actually webinar. It's not too late to go on our website on lightning tomorrow, international lightning. Ron Holly, an expert on that, and he'll be talking about lightning around the world. So if you have time tomorrow morning, it's at 1 p.m. Eastern time, the webinar. I think you'll like it. We also archive those as well. So putting a plug in for that webinar. The other thing is we also monitor, we take a look at drought. And so, you know, a lot is emphasized on rainfall and so forth, but just as important, the other side of the coin is to report zero when there's no rainfall. We ask folks to do that. And a lot of our information is looked at by the U.S. Drought Monitor, the authors there. And so we want to make people aware of what, you know, drought kind of creeps up. It takes some time to establish itself. And one of the things that we use, not only can CoCoRaHS observers submit rainfall reports, but we also have something called condition reports, condition monitoring. Here's a map. This is you're able to pull this up. It's also a dynamic map, which you can zoom in and zoom out. Folks, we ask them once a week to go in, take a look at the condition of their area. Does it look dry? Is it severely dry, near normal, wet? They can go and click on that. They can put stuff in using that scale bar and some anecdotal information, which I'll show you in a second. Kind of ask them to do it every Sunday if they get in the habit. And all those little triangles on there, the red ones are that are pointing down are the dry ones, and the blue ones are the wet ones. And that's superimposed over the U.S. Drought Monitor map behind that. So again, some really great information that our observers are helping out with as well. And here's just a typical observation. This came from last week in central Massachusetts. The report, the person said water restricted to handheld only. All local farmers' shallow pond is completely dry. And so they talk about these things. That's, you know, eyes and ears on the ground on what's happening really helps out with our drought folks. We've got guidance on there as well. There's a whole part of the website which goes into giving some background on what to look for and what is considered wet and dry in certain areas. And it all varies in different parts of the country. What could be, you know, really wet in one area may be normal and or dry in another area and so forth. So we've got those on there for folks to look at. Here's the report, or here's the form you can fill out, and they click on that, and again, there's a PowerPoint. It's just 5 extra minutes once a week to file. You can do it more than once a week, but again, it's just really a helpful thing as we monitor drought. And the third thing I just want to bring up is reference evapotranspiration. So the other side of the water cycle, not just what comes down, but what goes up back into the atmosphere, especially in agricultural areas. This is really helpful. We use the ET gauge on the bottom left there, and it's a little pricey. It's a little over $200, so we don't have a lot of folks measuring, but anybody is welcome to do this. We average about 120 observations a day, and we're all over the country. And if we look at the next slide, well, sorry, 2 slides from now, but let's look at this one real quick. Flash drought, and this you know, you measure it, we graph it for you there, and you can see how the quick onset within a couple of weeks in Illinois back here in 2012 came on, and then luckily they got some rain. But these maps and these graphs are very helpful at looking at the water balance. So the blue is the rainfall and the precipitation, and the evapotranspiration is the red on these maps. Here, and hosted by the Midwest Regional Climate Center, you can go on there. If you look at the bottom slide, there's different maps. These are all for CoCoRaHS, and up to 60 days. There's a map at the top. Those are the stations we have. And again, there is the ET gauge on the top right. That we fill it with water. It's got a ceramic top with a fabric that mimics a grass or an alfalfa leaf, and so it's pretty accurate. And again, it gives you a reference to. It's kind of like having a evap pan, but a little easier to use. Okay, so that's pretty much the network, what we do. And you're probably thinking to yourself, well, you know, maybe I could do this, or I know somebody that might like to observe precipitation in their backyard. And you know, a lot of people have family members doing it or colleagues. I know different offices, sometimes several people do it, compare from time to time, but there's 5 easy steps. It doesn't take a lot. So go to our web page. There's a place to sign up there, obtain the 4-inch rain gauge, and we ask you to use this particular gauge if you're participating in the network. So all of the observations are standardized. There's a training slideshow. We also have animations, which are very interesting. They're easy to watch, short little snippets on how to observe, where to place your gauge, and so forth. And then set up the gauge in a good location in your backyard. I know some places it's tough. You have a lot of trees and so forth, but do your best. We'd rather have you have the gauge out there. And the other thing is, take the gauge out of the box. You know, how many folks get the gauge and a year later, oh yeah, it's still sitting in the box. So as soon as you get it, open it, stick it in the driveway for now, and then start observing precipitation and report daily online. Last slide here. A lot of places we don't have observers, and so rural areas, people say, well, you know, there's nobody out there. So we've recruited some of the natural predators out there. This guy was a great observer here in Colorado for a while, but he would spill the gauge, drink the gauge. I think he eventually knocked the post over, and he's no longer with us. But anyway, thank you so much for your time today to talk about that. I'm going to leave this slide up here with my contact information and also our website. So with that, Mark, I'll turn it back over to you and hope we have some questions out there.
Thank you very much, Henry. Appreciate that. Yeah, we do have a couple questions. And, you know, if there's any more along the way, feel free to ask as we start answering them. So our first question states that my town gets very little rain, but hailstorms have occurred more often than I recall. Do CoCoRaHS reporters have to monitor all precipitation events?
They don't. And so, we asked you to do your best. You know, if you want to monitor hail, that's great. Some people don't measure snow in the winter, especially folks who are older. It's a little slippery getting out there. But, you know, something is better than nothing when you look at that. So measure the rain when you can. If you know, a lot of times it becomes addictive. People get into the habit. We've had a lot of retirees, wives call us up and say, thank you for giving my husband something to do each morning. So yeah, you don't have to measure each element. If you can, that's great. And especially with the hailstorms, we'd love to know, you know, what the hail looks like. Take a photo, you can upload that online. And so do the best you can.
Great, and kind of tying into that, but you know, what happens if you miss a reading or go on vacation? What's the best way to handle that?
See, once you join CoCoRaHS, you can't go on vacation anymore. We didn't
Okay.
tell you that earlier. No, I'm just kidding. So we have what's called a multi-day report. What you would do is you would put down your last reading before you left, and then when you get back, you fill out a multi-day report, so measure what's in the tube, and then put that in. And so that'll become part of the record. It won't show up on the daily maps, but it'll you know, help us to know how much rain did fall during that time. And if you know, we all miss days now and then, and it's okay. I mean, your most common observation would probably be 0. We've got a place you can go back and fill in zeros as well. So, but again, we want this to be fun. We don't want it to be drudgery where you feel like you're tied to the gauge and you can't do much. Live your life, measure when you can, and that's great.
Appreciate that. I'm gonna call out. I see that Ronald Haverin's in the chat, and he was our
Yes.
guy.
He's our Texas co-coordinator.
He is, yes, and he's done a fantastic job for Texas and for CoCoRaHS. And you know, one thing that he did for all those people with agencies out there is that there's a CoCoRaHS gauge right beside the Harris County Flood Control District alert gauge that's in their parking lot area. And so not only, you know, is there a CoCoRaHS gauge that's checked on a very good regular basis, but it can be directly compared to gauge data that's coming in on a real-time report. And Ronnie's taken a look at that to see how accurate different things are. And again, he's done a lot of great stuff for Texas and CoCoRaHS. So
Yeah, Ron, we appreciate it. You're one of our all-stars, so thank you.
and I also was in Houston during Harvey, and I had a few people reach out to me that said, I had a CoCoRaHS gauge, and I made sure I went and emptied it every hour or two to not empty it, but measure it and keep recordings going through the whole event. And realistically, you kind of mentioned this, Henry, but I just want to reiterate, those measurements taken during storms like Harvey are going to be some of the most accurate rainfall measurements collected. We had a few people with backyard weather stations with, those little tipping bucket all-in-one $200 ones you can get off of Amazon. And I tested them after Harvey, and they weren't very accurate, and they weren't trustable enough for records. But some of those CoCoRaHS gauges where people told me that they diligently went out and emptied it and made sure that they got every last drop of rain, I honestly would consider some of the most accurate rainfall data collected from Hurricane Harvey. So
Yeah, well, and it's, again, we don't want people putting themselves in danger if there is flooding and stuff like that, but we do really appreciate those observations. And in fact, several state rainfall records, 24-hour records now, have been recorded with CoCoRaHS observers with their CoCoRaHS gauges. I can think of 4 or 5 in different states. So again, people are doing a great job with that, and it is accurate information.
that segues well into the next question, which is how official can these CoCoRaHS measurements be in terms of things like records and being used for after action reports and various other events?
Right, so they're not official observations as with the National Weather Service, but when they're scrutinized and looked at, and there's good data in there as far as notes and so forth, they are looked at, and they can become the official record for the state. So there's a committee at NCEI that goes rigorously through the different observations that come in, and they can actually be used for that. But again, the data is really, the quality is really good. We look at that, we make sure it's top notch, the best we can. And so I think you'll find them right up there with any other observations that come in, and they can be used.
Thank you. We got another question that just came in.
Okay.
Just kind of asking about the trends that are occurring among CoCoRaHS volunteers. Groups who recruit community water quality monitors are noticing an aging volunteer force. And, I've seen something similar. I'm in Hayes County, just south of Austin, and, I'm in a few, exactly that. I'm with CoCoRaHS, I'm in a water quality monitoring, and I'm one of the younger ones. So I guess I'm curious as well as kind of what trends you've seen in terms of your volunteers and how you are recruiting people to be observers.
Yeah, so that's a great question, and we do have I would say, the component of our observers are probably 50 and over, the majority of them, and they do age out over time. We still have folks in their 90s. I think we may have a couple in their hundreds observing, but again, you will lose those over time. But the good news is that there are a lot of folks, especially with the app. I think the app has made a difference where folks can get into this. There's in any citizen science project, I think there's a gap probably for folks in their late 20s till early 50s where they're working, they're busy, they don't have time at home, and so. But we do teach a lot of folks in school. A lot of the homeschoolers are doing this kind of stuff. Trend wise, that's my guess. I know there's probably some more official data out there that some of the other guys in our group have looked at, but it is an aging group. I think with the co-op network we see that a lot. And one of the neat things with CoCoRaHS is that we consider ourselves the minor leagues for co-op, the National Weather Service cooperative program. So if they see somebody that's no longer being able to do the co-op, they'll find a nearby CoCoRaHS observer, and they kind of take it over. But yeah, we you know, we're up at 25,000 folks every year. We recruit probably about 5,000 on the average. So we got to keep, it's like water flowing in and out of a pipe. You want to keep that water in the pipe as long as possible, and you got to have a large inflow, but there is an outflow as well. And so, yeah, I think we're probably, again, I can't actually answer that officially, but folks in our organization, I can get back to you if you send me an email to get more information.
Thank you, and I appreciate the hydrology reference there. They're on us a bone.
Oh yeah, there you go.
We had another question come in, which is, what is the QC process for the data? What is considered bad or inaccurate data? And is this data still reported? How is QC data differentiated online if observations are reported immediately?
Right, so we have a team here at CSU. We also have 264 state and regional coordinators around the country with the National Weather Service, with state climate offices and so forth. They take a good look at this data, and if we, you know, it's pretty easy to see an outlier a lot of times. Those that we immediately mark an NA on there and contact the observer. A lot of times it's a decimal error or so forth. So we do contact, submit a ticket. We contact the observer about the information, and the data is pulled until it can be rectified that it is accurate or not. And so that's one way where we have folks doing that.
Okay, great. Yeah, so you kind of have volunteers to help the volunteers to make sure that all that data is accurate and reliable.
That's right. Yeah, a lot of eyes out there, and we'll hear it from an observer too. You know, gee, my neighbor reported 12 inches. We only got 1 inch. You know, and right away we're right on it. So they're watching as well as we are. The maps really bring that out. When you look at the maps, you can, with the colors, you can really see where there's errors sometimes.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's a little bit hard to differentiate when you gave that example near New Braunfels where they got, 11 inches of rain, I think it was, compared to anyone else, or 8 inches of
Right.
rain.
Yeah. We thought maybe they put the time in by mistake. You know, we thought that was and then sure enough, the observation. So that's the important part with the observation. If you do have heavy rainfall, is to put the notes in there, because they were really helpful, and they knew what they were talking about. It wasn't just an error. So those observation notes really, really are helpful, especially when we're setting records and stuff with rainfall.
Great. I'm going to give a second for any final questions while I make my final reminders. Just as a reminder, this presentation will be posted on our YouTube channel. With 24 hours to 48 hours, I believe, of this event, you'll also get an email with the certificate attendance for those CEC, continuing education credits. And look for our next webinar announcement, which will be coming out soon for our August webinar, which will be the last Wednesday of August. So we actually got one more question that came in,
Okay.
which is about accessing data. So I know you can view historical reports from the CoCoRaHS webpage, but I'm curious to hear if there are plans to make the entire historical database available for download for stations or a single station, for example, a CSV file.
Yeah, and that is, just let us know. Send an email to info@CoCoRaHS.org, and we'll give you the way to do that. So we share that data with a lot of people. They're able to pull up. I don't know the computer part of that, but they do this all the time, and you can ingest data daily as well. So not only the full record, but also what's going on each day. You can bring that into your systems. Julian Turner is our IT guy. He is right on top of that. So
great, appreciate that. Well, thank you again, Henry. We really appreciate you taking time to share some information about CoCoRaHS, and thanks to everyone who attended. The questions and feedback were great. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to Henry or you can reach out to me. So thank you, everyone, and have a good afternoon, evening, or morning.
thanks, Mark.